Rebote dum 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 bye. Dum 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 irrompe. Oh, am I on? Oh, okay, I should probably stop singing songs poorly. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Doing Better News Experience, the Sunday review, the sanity check. We should call it the Sunday sanity check because I feel like our regular news flow is insane. I don't mean that to be in any way disrespectful to anybody in their mental health. I'm not talking about. I'm not being derisive to anyone with mental health issues. I'm talking about actual insanity, as in good old Einstein, or what's quoted as Einstein's definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing and expecting different results. And it seems like that's the guiding principle of the mainstream of our culture right now. So, I'm doing my best I have a really bad coffee habit. I'm doing my best to switch it for an iced tea habit. Let's see how that goes. So today, guys, lots of good stuff coming. We have, I got some good news stuff I want to get into. We're going to get into some local news. I got 3 local stories pertaining to Mass and New Hampshire that I think are interesting. One that hits awfully close to home for me. I got some national, international news I want to talk about, sort of what I see as the main stories for this week. And then we're going to get into some of my favorite clips from my social medias this week. So I got 5 clips that I thought are kind of interesting. And then, as always, I got a couple of takes for you guys. So that will be our news show for today. If you're unfamiliar with the Doing Better Show and what we do here, the Doing Better Show is now a 2-part thing. Hopefully in the future it'll be a many-part thing. It'll be like an octopus of positivity and news and real information. But for now, we have a 2-part thing that we do. We do the main Doing Better Show, which will be on right after me at 8 o'clock, when we interview really awesome local, whether it's artists, musicians, activists, entrepreneurs, anybody local who wants to share with us what they're doing. And we have some really great guests coming up over the next few weeks. And if you're interested in being a guest, you have things you'd like to share with us, you're doing some cool things locally, and I'm not real specific on what that is. Anything that you're doing that you think is contributing, making the world a better place, let's talk about it, because it's so easy for us to focus on what everyone else should do better, when the only thing you have control over is what you do better. And the only thing I have control over is what I'm doing better. And in our communities, what we can come together and do better. So that's what the main Doing Better Show is for. For those of you that are familiar with me, I'm Oliver Ox. I am a passionate person, certainly passionate about all things social justice, news, economics. I've been paying attention to politics since I was just a wee one, and I try to keep an open mind and critical thinking. So that's what brought on the Doing Better News, our Sunday Sanity Review. And what this is about is a nonpartisan take on what's going on in the news. I really think that we need to start thinking outside the box and having many more critical discussions about issues. Not about your guy's worse than my guy, or, oh, have you heard what the other side is saying? Oh, they're all such fill in the blank. And having much more critical discussions, because I'm fortunate enough to spend a lot of time meeting new people around this country, all over this country, and I find the vast majority of us have very similar values, and we are unnecessarily divided. All that said, let's get into the news for this week. A couple things that I think are interesting going on. Let me get my screen ready. Des, if you'll switch over for me. So this is a couple of weeks old, but something we never really talked about. And yet we've talked about some of the predecessors. I wanted to point this out because there's something I like about this. So there's the state of New Hampshire has the House passed a cannabis legalization bill. Context here: New Hampshire, despite being considered by the Cato Institute the freest state in the nation, despite having "Live Free or Die" on our license plate, has never legalized marijuana. I believe there was a decriminalization a few years ago that basically took away the criminal fines for under a half an ounce, I believe. But in the last few years, Massachusetts and many of our surrounding states have legalized completely, have commercialized. So there was a bill to pass, a bill to legalize passed in the House in New Hampshire, which I thought was very interesting. What I thought was most interesting about it is this is a little bit different than what we're used to seeing. So this one actually doesn't make a legal framework. It doesn't do like what Massachusetts did and what most states are doing, which is, okay, we're going to have to regulate this. We're going to have to make a bunch of money off it. We're going to have to set up, little stores. And if you travel around the country and you visit any of these establishments, they're all a little bit different. Every state has slightly different rules about what you can and can't do, how much they're going to charge you, this, that, and the other. They're roughly similar, but they're all different states have different ways of implementing it. What I find interesting, and I personally find most attractive about this bill, and probably what makes it the least likely to be successful, is that they're not doing this here. They're basically just saying, let's make it legal if you're under 21 and take all references to marijuana out of the law, to cannabis out of the law. And that's actually what I think is the appropriate way to deal with this. This is a plant. I don't see why there needs to be any regulation of it, quite frankly, beyond limiting children having access to it. I think that's perfectly reasonable. But my personal sort of libertarian leaning view on this is just take it out of the law. There shouldn't have been laws about how you deal with this plant in the first place. And many more people have been harmed by marijuana prohibition than have ever been helped by it. Also, what I see coming out of the legal establishments, again, and we have a few people in our community who are definitely members of the cannabis community as well, but it seems like we're getting lots of low-quality products out of the mainstream establishments. And I would rather not have that be what dominates. If you go and you want to go buy some cannabis edibles, it's all a bunch of high fructose corn syrup, yellow 5 trash, and that you really have no business eating. There's a lot of people who are very dubious about about how organic, what's been sprayed on these on the cannabis, etc. All these places all they sell it on is the concentration, how much THC is in it. So you end up with very, very strong product that may lack a lot of the medicinal value of some, of less strong products. So I'm all about this New Hampshire bill to basically decriminalize entirely, to legalize without regulating. I think that would be the best way to deal with this. We'll see what happens with that. All right. Next thing I got in the news. So this is one that really, this is not a happy story for me. I got off one that was kind of a happy story for me, just because it's very rare that I see anybody in any political realm, anyone in a position of power putting forward a bill that I think is a good idea. So here we can swing pretty hard in the other direction. There's a really scary story going on in Mass right now. There's a whole, and Des, if you want to switch over to this, nurses at a Massachusetts hospital concerned about growing number of cancer cases among staff. Specifically, I think there was 10 plus nurses on the same unit who were getting diagnosed with brain cancer. If you haven't if you're not understanding what's currently going on with cancer in the world, certainly in this country, there's been an absolute explosion in cancer over the last 2 or 3 years. Some of us think that's a very significant timeline as to why that's been happening. I lost my father a year and a half ago to a very aggressive cancer, which I would call a turbo cancer, which many people have claimed have named turbo cancers, and quite a few other people close to me in these couple of years. And there's something going on that we're getting very aggressive, very rapid cancers, and they're hitting populations that they haven't in the past. Kids getting diagnosed with cancer at much higher rates, young, healthy people who aren't typically cancer patients. We have a problem, and a whole bunch of nurses in one unit all getting the same brain cancer diagnosis. The hospital specifically says there's no environmental risk, so they're not saying there's some paint or some chemicals or some fill in the blank that's causing it. I can certainly think of one new, potentially very dangerous thing that lots of nurses did 2 or 3 years ago that could possibly have caused this. I know it's something that my own father did 2 or 3 years ago before he got very sick, and lots of other people have as well. I think it's time that we start asking ourselves some hard questions. And these hard questions are going to require us putting aside all the political horseshit. Because when we're talking about cancer rates going through the roof, this is much more important than whatever your personal politics is, than your left-right stuff. Well, those people don't wear a mask. Those people do wear a mask. Any of that horseshit, this is far more important. And a lot of us around some of the interventions around COVID had a lot of critical things to say. And I lost a lot of friends. I lost a lot of people who I thought were friends because I was outspoken against some of the things that the government was pushing and the corporations were pushing around COVID. And I don't need to be right. I mean, I am right. I was right. Let's be honest. I'm happy to go through my old tweets and keep scoreboard with some of you guys out there. But it's not about that. That's really not important. I don't need to take a position of moral high ground on this. I just need us to go and figure out what we're doing that's causing such a rapid decline in health, because these are real people who are dying, and it's a lot of them. So I encourage you to do some research in this area. Obviously, any meaningful research will need to be done outside of the corporate mainstream. All right, I got one more local story that I want to talk about. This is another one that I have a little bit of a personal stake in, based on my take on it. So Maggie Goodlander, I live in southern New Hampshire, and Maggie Goodlander recently ran and won a congressional seat in New Hampshire. I was not a big fan of her. She's from the Hillary Clinton world. She's one of these sort of tries to look like a modern progressive, but is very well connected to people that have, I think, a fairly long history of doing things that only help large corporations and well-connected people. So Maggie Goodlander has come out and she's put her 2 cents into the Pete Hegseth Signal drama. So I'll throw this on real quick and then I'll catch you up on the Pete Hegseth Signal drama if you're not familiar with it. So here's just a clip of my senator.
Some members of New Hampshire's congressional delegation calling for
Congresswoman,
Hegseth's resignation.
I believe, as I said, when Pete Hegseth was nominated to this role, he lacks the judgment, he lacks the experience to serve as our Secretary of Defense. He was unfit to be confirmed in this job, and he should resign immediately.
So this, the story, actually, let's talk about Maggie Goodlander first. So Maggie Goodlander, perfectly, she's so well put together. She just has a face for TV. She's so well spoken and clear as she reads off her teleprompter with the Democrat talking points here. And she's criticizing Pete Hegseth, who deserves to be criticized. So what happened this week is there was Pete Hegseth was in a Signal chat with what he thought were other members, high-ranking government bomb droppers, and he had included someone, not him, someone in the chat had included a journalist in there by mistake, and this had blown up as this big story when they were talking about bombing Yemen. So Maggie Goodlander and the Democrats are, oh, Pete Hegseth, you're so unprofessional. We knew you were going to be unprofessional. This is why we didn't vote for you. You're a bad, bad man. And I think there's probably something to that. You probably should be using slightly more secure ways of communicating than a Signal chat. It's why this kind of reeks of made-up political theater to me. What I find mind-boggling is where's the party that's going to say, hey, maybe you shouldn't be dropping fucking $500,000 bombs on tents in Yemen? Where's that piece of the discussion? Who's available for that? Because I see the Republicans are like, yeah, bomb him. Trump says bomb, 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 MAGA, bomb, bomb. And the Democrats are like, Trump said bomb, don't bomb. This is bad, and here's why it's bad, because he didn't check the right box before he bombed. It's like, no. Why are you taking my fucking money that I work very hard for and then shipping it to American arms manufacturers to then build incredibly expensive fancy bombs to drop on fucking people who live in tents? It's ludicrous. And again, let's go through the official story. This is because the Houthis are disrupting American shipping lanes. They must be evil. Yes, they're anybody who's going to disrupt American shipping, evil. Let's bomb them. Why are they doing that? Oh, well, because we are providing weapons and for the Israelis who are currently starving the Gazans to death. So, again, I'm not signing up for the Houthis. I'm not a Houthi. I'm not in any religious groups. And I'm certainly not in religious groups that bomb people. But it's time for maybe to take a step back and go, are we the bad guys in this situation? I'll give you the answer in case you weren't sure. Yes is the answer. We're the bad guys in this situation. And you have MAGA, who until Trump got elected, had a very large group of anti-war sentiment. A huge number of the MAGA supporters I talked to over the last year put Ukraine right at the top of the list. How do we have money for wars in Ukraine when fill in the blank, right? Starving homeless veterans, poor infrastructure, crumbling bridges, high taxes. There's 1,000 reasons to oppose sending billions of dollars to fund wars in other countries. And now all of a sudden, Mr. Red Hat's in there, and we all love dropping bombs on countries that I know you cannot fucking find on the map. I would love to pop quiz people who support bombing Yemen and tell them to find it on the map. Ridiculous. It's just more warmongering. And instead of Democrats having a pair and calling out the Republicans in this situation, Trump in this situation, for building on this violent conflict that doesn't need to happen, for wasting our money in a situation that fundamentally is not our problem. And it's only a situation because we're funding the bad guys. We're funding the people committing a genocide and starving people. And that's why we find ourselves at odds with the Houthis, right? They didn't bomb America. They didn't come over here. They didn't let's go pick a fight because we hate freedom or whatever Islamophobic horseshit that you're getting fed right now. It's ridiculous. And again, as at fault Trump is for doing this, and Pete Hegseth and all the rest of these, neocons wearing MAGA hats, pretending they're not neocons, the Democrats are just as at fault because they only argued about Pete Hegseth because they're like, is he from outside the system? Is he not going to go along with our wars? If Democrats had been anti-war in the first place, if they had not funded what's been going on in Gaza for the last couple of years, this horrific situation, if they had not decided to pick a fight with Vladimir Putin over a piece of land, again, you can't find on the fucking map, then the Democrats would have won the last election. It was anti-war sentiment from the right, from people who voted for Trump, that was a huge part of pushing him past the finish line. And it was a complete lack of that from the Democrats. The amount of people on the left that I spoke to who said, I don't really want to vote for Kamala Harris because they just stood idly by while we committed a genocide. It's a huge number of people. A huge number of people. So I could go on for a goddamn week about this. I'm sorry. It's just the way we're so okay with spending our limited resources doing the worst things ever. It's wild to me. And the moment your guy's in power, all of a sudden you're for it. You recognize how horrible it was when Biden was doing it, but now that it's red hats, you're like, oh well, the thing is America, and if they didn't want to, they wouldn't America. It's just such a load of horseshit. Sorry. Let's get into more international stuff now that we've got away from New Hampshire and Massachusetts. So one great little piece of news that happened this week was pretty funny. This is one way in which people were rightfully outraged. Des, will you give me this screen, please? So Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick went on, I'm trying to remember. I listened to the clip earlier in the week. He was talking about Social Security and how they want to cut Social Security. They want to, and he basically said, well, if they cut Social Security, my 94-year-old mother-in-law, she's not going to call and start complaining. You know who's going to do that? The scammers or the fraudsters was his exact words. And it's a really, what's wild about it and what it really does a good job of illustrating is the problem with having billionaires run your government. Howard Lutnick is worth, I don't know, some billions of dollars. Well, of course, his mother-in-law isn't going to freak out if she doesn't get her Social Security check because her son-in-law has billions of dollars. You see how that's a slightly different situation? Now, this is not to say that there should be no auditing or no cleaning up of Social Security. I'm sure there's parts of the Social Security plan that could be tightened up. This is not to say there's no fraud. I think Social Security relatively is low on fraud, but any system's going to have fraud. So this is not to say there's nothing to criticize about Social Security. A lot of people on the economic right will tell you, I paid this much money into Social Security over the years, and if I put that money into the stock market, I would have made this much more money. Look how I'm getting screwed by Social Security. And I think there's an argument to that as well. With entitlements like Social Security, I think we can debate on what is and what isn't a good use of funds. I don't think these are all good or all bad things. These are worthy of discussions on the efficient and smart ways to make sure that people aren't starving on the streets. But I think the story here is how out of touch we get so many people in government are. And again, this is not necessarily a partisan issue. Next little nugget I got. I hope you've heard that if you put your DNA into 23andMe, that you done fucked up. 23andMe is going out of business, and part of their bankruptcy proceedings, they're allowed to sell all their data. Some crazy conspiracy theorists said years ago that they would never do 23andMe for this exact reason, because then they can sell your data. They can use that data to fill in the blanks. Again, these are things that the biology of this stuff is way above my head. I just know there's a lot of it, and I don't trust big corporations, and I'm really glad I didn't. So they are saying that there's a way of you to retrieve some of your data if you did do this. So if that's you, look into that. But being a paranoid and not trusting seems to look smarter and smarter every day. Des, what do you got?
Clones are incoming. I'm saying that it's.
So that's one of the things.
Or like a Skinwalkers.
No.
It's like a horror thing that like transforms into different beings. Or there's gonna be some fucked up shit they're gonna do with that data. With millions of people's DNA, there's some fucked up shit they could do.
Yeah, I mean the most innocent thing that we could say is like making specifically targeted medicines, things like that. But I have heard the higher level conspiracies you get into will say, yeah, watch out for your clone, motherfucker. So interesting stuff. Either way, trusting corporations usually not a good idea. While we're talking about corporations and how trusting them isn't a good idea, I don't know if you guys remember back right at the beginning of Trump's presidency, he talked about us taking back the Panama Canal. It's an interesting moment to contemplate individuality versus a community view, right? Like, who is we? What does we mean? We're going to take back the Panama Canal. Because in one sense, and I think in really the true sense, he was right. Because in Donald Trump's collectivist mind, and I think in the collectivist mind of the ruling class, BlackRock is we. If you're a you and me guy, I have a tougher time believing that. So Des, if you'll give me my screen. So they're going back a couple of months. This was back a month. So on March 5th, Trump had a claimed victory basically because BlackRock is going to buy the Panama Canal. The news this week is that deal got held up. There's some there's some red tape and some other stuff going on that may cause that to not happen. Also on the news this week, there's more Greenland talk. And again, I really question who we is. Oh, we're going to take over Greenland. We need to secure our borders. We are going to take the Panama Canal. We need to do this. Who's we? Because I'm guessing BlackRock's not going to share any of their profits from the Panama Canal with me. And I'm guessing if Donald Trump goes and takes Greenland, I mean, American soldiers will probably go and die as a result. That'll be we, I guess. That'll be people just like you and me. But we won't be getting the mineral rights That'll be BlackRock or ExxonMobil or whatever. We won't be benefiting anyway, personally. I mean, we'll have all the skin in the game, but we won't get anything out of it. And I think it's just really important to step back and anytime somebody invokes what we need to do, take a second and think of what that is. I will be referencing that later. Des, do you have something else you want to add? No? All right, so here's another. So for those of you that are interested in MAHA, so I was of the opinion that the Make America Healthy Again movement was maybe the most interesting part of the potential of the Trump presidency. Like every president, when they make promises, I generally assume they're full of shit and lying. And if you go through and look at presidential promises over the years, go look at what Obama promised and then tell me you're not mad. But so I generally assume they're full of it, and I pretty much believe that with MAHA as well. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., someone I've been following for years, and I think he's done a lot of interesting and positive work, but he's a well-connected, wealthy politician, and I don't trust those people. So I didn't trust a whole lot of this. I didn't have high hopes for anything positive coming out of MAHA. One of the interesting things that happened in this election cycle was influencers getting a sort of semi-official role in the campaign and then in the government. We saw this with the Epstein stuff when some of the favorite influencers of the Trump administration got to go to the White House and have little binders that said Epstein information in them, even though they had nothing to do with it. There's a lot of drama in the conservative-ish media space right now around one of those influencers who is House and Habit and Candace Owens. There's all kinds of drama there. Some maybe behind the scenes stuff with RFK and a younger woman who he had a sexting scandal with. There's all sorts of things there. A lot of them feel very honeypot-ish. But we're not, the details of all that stuff are still very murky. If you're interested in sexual blackmail and Epstein stuff and all that kind of interesting stuff, go check out Candace Owens' most recent video. She gets into that. There's a lot there, but none of it's solid enough for me to really talk about in depth, though. I'll leave it for you guys. What is interesting is some of these conservative accounts coming out and basically simping for big soda. So one of the moves from the MAHA crowd has been to cut government funding for benefits to be used on soda. So there's the biggest program I believe is SNAP. That's it's basically food stamps, and it's a fairly large program. I don't know how many billions of dollars SNAP is, but it's a very large federal program that provides food assistance for people who need it. Seems like pretty good use of public funds to me. One of the issues that people have brought up with SNAP, specifically sort of these MAHA types, is that Des, you got a
SNAP spending $112 billion.
I think $112 billion. So a lot of money, but in a country of 350 million people, it's it probably buys a lot of food. Unfortunately, you can buy a whole variety of food on here. Now, back when they were in the 80s and the 90s, when they were attacking the welfare queens, they'd be like, "Oh, they're buying lobster with their food stamps or whatever." And one of the things that you can buy, and I think I heard that it was something like 10% of soda manufacturers' revenues come from this, is you can buy soda with your SNAP benefits. So, hold on, excuse us for 1 second. Des just dodging by, letting our guests in. So you can buy soda with SNAP benefits. This is, I think, a very reasonable thing for us to say, you know what, if we're using public funds, especially for people who, many of whom are on public funds for their health care, right? These are people on getting Medicaid, that we shouldn't be funding things like soda that we know are really bad for your health. So that looked like it was going to be a part of this movement. RFK talked about it a little bit. And what we've had recently is, I believe it was about a week or two ago, it was in this last week, that a whole bunch of these conservative accounts that have been sort of the favorite accounts of the Trump administration, all of a sudden came out, these influencers came out as against the soda ban. What was notable about this was the fact that looked like they were using about 2 different scripts, talking about, Trump has a Diet Coke button and we can't limit people's freedom of choice, and how wrong is it to limit people's freedom of choice, and blah, blah, blah. And it just speaks to the hypocrisy and just the fucking stupidity of team sports. These are supposed to be conservatives. Generally, conservatives are not super pro public assistance in the first place. They don't think that that's an efficient way to spend money. Not all, but I think that's a fairly accurate statement. And instead of saying, yes, let's save some money, let's not subsidize people eating the worst food possible. I mean, soda's pretty indefensible from a health standpoint, I believe. They're coming and go, oh, no, we can't do this, this is radical and whatever. Well, it turns out they're all getting money from a PR firm that works for the soda industry. Why is my phone ringing? Which is somewhere. I bet Des locked himself out. That is my ring, by the way, if you want to know who's it. Why is my phone ringing? Bro, this is mad annoying. Hey, I don't even know where it is. Hey, welcome. It's 1,000 degrees in here. Sorry, guys.
No, it's great.
So anyway, I thought what was interesting about that, again, is the complete hypocrisy. I don't think, Miles Chong or the Clown World account or any of these so-called conservatives really, from a principle standpoint, want to spend public funds on soda. But because they're a bunch of grifters who are just getting big handouts from Coca-Cola, all of a sudden they think it's fine to have people spend their SNAP benefits on soda. All right, next thing, got a couple more things we're going to have time to get to on here. And if you guys want to hop on, feel free to join whenever you are ready. All right, let's go to stuff that's... Every time I'm setting up the show and I'm putting my notes together, I'm like, we got to talk about what's going on in Gaza, and I don't want to, and I find myself doing this on the socials all the time when I'll get on and I'll get onto my X or my Instagram, and like the first thing I see is just like the most heartbreaking, dead baby video or whatever, and I can't, but we can't ignore it. Like, that's not... I'm responsible. My tax dollars are going to fund it, so I can't just close my eyes and say I don't want to deal with it. So this is today's story. This is a today story. Does you want to give me this one? 14 bodies of missing Gaza health workers attacked by Israel found. So there's been a long history for the last 18 months of this. I don't want to call it a war, because the war is between two armies, and Gaza doesn't have an army. In this conflict, genocide, call it what you will. I'll see what gets me kicked off of YouTube. But of attacks on health workers, aid workers, people supplying food, etc., in addition to the children and women and other innocents that are normally terrorized in these situations. Anyway, the latest Israeli bombardment killed 64 people, and they have dug up 14 missing Gaza healthcare workers. So just horrendous. Well, guess what our government is doing to make the situation better? MAGA came in, right? They're fixing things, right? They're fixing all the things. Des, show us what the wonderful thing that we're doing to fix this problem. Oh, we're going to take away the visas of people that complain about it. So if you, as someone here on a green card, criticize a foreign government, not even our government, a foreign government, we're going to take away your visa, and then we're going to kidnap you in the streets. And then people in red hats are going to cheer for it for some reason. So that's been my time last week. It's slightly destroying to my soul, I got to be honest, because I was hoping that Trump voters were going to realize. I spoke with so many of you over the last year and heard your concerns, and they were the concerns of most people, right? Corrupt government, spending money on things that don't help American people, and a media that is complicit. And I agree with all of those things. And Trump made a whole bunch of promises, some of which I thought were pretty good. You know, releasing JFK files, releasing all sorts of other classified information that has no business being classified. And again, we're going to go after the deep state. We're going to change things. And what we got instead was people who have legally protested, who are legally here in the country, getting kidnapped and then shipped to other states so they can get deported because America, I guess it's America.
I mean, freedom of speech is.
Oh yeah, Des, can you get
Hello.
And we got camera 2, Des, all that fun stuff. Hey, Amberly's here. What's up?
Hey, what's
How are
going on? Here to talk about free speech.
Yay! Actually, we got lots of free speech stuff. It's pretty much at least half of what I got going for the rest of this.
Beautiful. I love that. I mean, what isn't there like that question? Is freedom ever actually free? Does freedom exist? Free will, is that real?
Ooh, okay, good. So I wasn't planning on ranting today, but I've been brewing this rant for like a month. And this is going to all right, here we go. Here's why it's a bad idea to say healthcare is a right. Here's why, all right, this is, see, here we go. Here's why we need to be very careful. Here's why I'm a rights supremacist. You like that? That's pretty terrible. I came up with that. Yeah, that's a bad one. I thought of that today. I'm like, I shouldn't ever say that, but I'm saying it. Rights. What is a right? We need to be very careful because I think we need to hold rights in their own special glowing compartment in society. Here's why I say that. In order for us to live as people in a society, we need to recognize other people's rights. And what do I mean by right? A right is basically the idea that you are your own person. You're you, and I'm me, and you get to decide what happens with you, and I get to decide what happens with me. And we all own our bodies, and we all get to control what happens with our bodies. And if you look at the Constitution, it's kind of, the Bill of Rights is basically just that thing said in every different way. You have a right to believe what you want. You have a right to privacy. They can't just come and, make soldiers stay in your house, and they can't just come and search your house and just write down the list, right? Mm-hmm. Our founding fathers had many, 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 many flaws as human beings. They didn't do a great job of sticking to what they said and applying it universally, but they had just kicked out an oppressive regime, and they understood that part. It's important that we always keep rights in their own category. And why I say that healthcare is not a human right is because healthcare is an entitlement. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to say that you're in a functioning society as wealthy as ours, people should be entitled to healthcare. They should be entitled to a roof over their head. They should be entitled to clean water and food. Those are debatable things, but I think we can, as normal people, say, you know what? I think that's decent. I think it's decent when we live in a society that can afford those things. It's indecent to let a sick person just kick them out because they can't afford it, right? It's indecent to let a starving person starve because they don't have money. It's indecent. And we should have entitlements. But that's not the same as rights. Because entitlements are dependent, right? If we were in 1423, we're not all entitled to full health care. Because there's no one to give you that fucking healthcare. You're not entitled to a certain standard of living because that standard of living was not possible, right? What you would consider a basic entitlement to a standard of living in healthcare today was not possible in 1432. However, in 1432, you still had rights. At any point in human history, you as a human being should have the right to determine what happens to you in your body and where you go.
I hear what you're saying. Okay. However, it's just like we say for everything else. Like, how we are constantly telling older generations, like, well, you just got to, roll with the punches. It's a technological society now. You have to go with that. It's like, as our population expands and as we grow, and obviously we have so much more at our fingertips at this point. There's so much more out there. I think that you have to, also, rights have to be malleable. It should be, healthcare should be a right now because we do have access to those things. And some people do have universal healthcare. And I do think that people should just have that. It sucks those countries that are third world countries that don't have that accessible. I wish they did. I do think they should. I I do think it's like it should be right. It should be right, in my opinion.
But I think we have a word for that. I think it's called entitlement. I think there's because always there, because I think rights are such. I don't think rights are malleable. I think you don't ever have a right to tell me what to do with my body ever. I don't ever have a right to tell you what to do with your body ever. And if there's a million,
malleable is the wrong word. I would say expanded upon. I feel like everything should advance as society advances.
But what if your right to healthcare depends on someone else losing their right to bodily autonomy?
I would never vote for something like that.
That's why rights and entitlements are different, and why rights are supreme. What? Because we'll always find excuses to degrade other people's rights, especially people who we can minimalize or marginalize. We'll always find excuses to take away their rights in service of the greater good, in service of safety or whatever. So here's another one. Like, I think a border is not a right. You don't have a right to a country. You don't have a right to a border. I think you can say people are.
I mean, I would expand upon that. I'm like, you don't have a right to land.
Right, but if you have a claim on something that you've added your labor to, I think there's a good argument that makes it your own.
Yeah, it's entitlement.
So I tend to agree with you, actually, because that's what I'm talking about does depend on someone else defending your situation. But the problem with being willing to step back on rights and lower them to anything else is it becomes something that can be abused, and it becomes something that we can start playing with and go, well, it's sort of like this, but we end up with that the sort of the meme of the train and the guy pulling the trigger to go either way. And I just don't think, I think that's why we're in the situation we're in. I think that's why Trumpers can go, well, she was a threat to national security. We didn't let her in the country to come and criticize. We didn't let her in the country to come start protesting.
Is that what they're saying?
That's exactly what they're saying. That's exactly how they're saying. Yeah. I do my best to listen to all sides and try and find the logical, smart thing about what people are saying. I'm struggling on this one.
I just can't see anything logical about deporting someone who is legally here on a visa, especially you're obviously talking about the PhD student from Tufts.
There's actually a few.
Oh
I am speaking about her. Hold on.
I've been busy moving.
The Tufts one there was the woman taken off the street was the Tufts one, right? Mm-hmm. The Columbia one was the one we talked about last week, Mahmoud Khalil.
Yep.
Yeah. And there's been a couple other similar situations.
Yeah. Well, I saw recently something saying that they're now allowing for like collateral arrests. So American-born citizens, like act like us.
Is it American citizens? I thought the thing I heard with the collateral thing is they said like, oh, we're mostly going after criminal illegal immigrants. But so let's say you're in an apartment with 10 people who are here illegally, and they come after one person in that apartment who's been, who's a bad guy, who's been beating and, whatever people. So they go after the guy who's a violent criminal to deport him. The collateral is like, oh, the rest of you, let me see your papers too. Ugh. So
it just grosses me out.
But again, I think that's a different fundamental situation, because if we're going to live in a world with borders, there does need to be some border policy. There does need to be some immigration rules. There does need to be some enforcement of those immigration rules.
Well, the context in which I heard it was this story of a man in Chicago who was like around 50-something years old, was walking down the street, and they took him, and he actually had his stuff on him, like his passport, and he was like, look at me, I'm an American citizen. They held him for 10 hours, finally looked at his wallet that he was trying to show them, saw that he was an American citizen, and let him go. And then when the lawyers tried to go after them for that, they were like, we have no record of him being here. And that's what they were considering, like, at that point, a collateral.
Okay. I hadn't heard that language used in that situation. Okay.
Right. So like that's the context I'm hearing it from. And I mean, they're doing it kind of like, if you look like you're Spanish, if you look like you're ethnic, like, it's kind of indiscriminate.
Yeah, I think so. One thing that a lot of people have pointed out before this is that years ago, the border definition is anywhere 100 miles from the border. So that's where like ICE is allowed to go. But if you think about, remember, every ocean's a border. So who doesn't like? If you think about how many people live 100 miles from a border, it's like half the country, right? Like if you like all New York, Boston, Philadelphia, like those are all 100 miles, less than 100 miles from the border. So they've been subject to ICE before this for years, and there's been lots of times when it's been a sketchy thing for people to travel, and people being there's checkpoints all in the South, right? There's like these are things that are not allowed in the Constitution. The Fourth Amendment says you can't have checkpoints, right? Like you can't just pull people over and search them. It's very clear in the Constitution, right? And they've been getting away with that for years in the name of immigration. And there's the nonpartisan conspiracy theory community, which I'm a proud member of, has been talking about the problem with the Trump presidency for a while is the bringing in of this digital gulag, whatever you want to call it, but the digitizing of the border, because he's not talking about the wall anymore. He's not talking about a wall. He's talking about cameras and facial recognition and all of us having that ID that goes along with that.
Surveillance recently,
right? And that's like why the Elon Musk stuff is scary too, because then and Palantir and Peter Thiel and all these guys, because then you're talking about the technology to make that thing happen, and.
Remember when they suggested putting a chip in your skin for Tesla?
Yeah. Well, there was people doing that for even a while.
Why would you ever agree to something?
But people
like
have put
that?
chips in. There were people talking about that for vaccine passports too.
No.
Same.
Nope.
But again, the reason that I'll always come back to white supremacy is that
It's just too close.
these things, I know, it's the whole point. It's great. Is that these things should not be the same way. You know, the left were the ones that 4 years ago were trying to take away people they disagreed with rights. Right? They were trying to say if you don't want to get a shot, you can't go to. The federal government should fire you, and you shouldn't be able to go here, and you shouldn't be able to go there, and you should have to have a vaccine passport to go X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Which again is a violation of people's fundamental rights, of rights that we shouldn't have to compromise in order to be part of society.
Yeah.
So,
And I definitely was one of the ones that erred on the side of like, it's just a vaccine, fucking get it. I like didn't understand. And I think I also had a little bit of a grudge because all of a sudden people were saying my body, my choice that I hadn't otherwise heard say that before. And I was like, get the fucking vaccine.
But lots of us said my body, my choice, who've always said my body, my choice.
Oh, no,
from the jump.
no, for sure. But I hindsight 2020, I'm like, now people get COVID all the time. And they're like, oh,
Yeah.
COVID.
I mean, so I was fairly vocal opponent of everything COVID from the jump, but I saw it through a different lens. I saw it through the lens of a government operation, not through the lens of a virus.
Yeah.
And it made perfect sense through the lens of a government operation. So when all the people who were like, wait, why is this true for a virus? And they were confused. I wasn't confused at all because I was like, oh, well, this is how the government works.
Yeah.
This is how they get more power and more money by instilling fear in people.
Yeah. No, they did a really good job of that.
They did, and a really good job of every time they got caught lying blatantly with their pants on, like, well, the new science says that, like, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wait, what about those who us at the beginning said science always changes, there's no such thing as a science? We didn't talk to you ever, and blah. So anyway, whatever. I'm not going to... Woosah.
No, I definitely didn't have, like, strong opinions. Like, I wasn't telling... Like, it was an internal get the fucking vaccine. But... Yeah, no, hindsight 2020, fucking crazy.
Yeah.
They really are out here just like fear mongering us in every direction.
Yep. So while we're on, the last story I talked about was Marco Rubio talking about how proud he is to take away people's visas. In Germany, a top UN official has been canceled. Des, will you give me this? This is a top UN official who's going to speak out about what's happening in Gaza. She's also basically had that opportunity to take away, has been labeled as an anti-Semite and all the same things that they always say about everyone. So this is not just in America. It is not just America that is using government to enforce freedom of speech. We in America used to think we were better than that, but I guess we've just given up on that completely. Des, you got something?
Yeah, I was going to say about through all this time of us killing dictatorships, it's ironic to see that we have become have gone in that direction of a dictatorship.
Yeah.
But again, it's only confusing if you listen to the mainstream media narrative, because if you are a crazy person like me and have been paying attention to what the government actually does instead of what they said, well, we've been supporting dictatorships since forever, right? In 1979, we killed the leader Chile, Allende, who was democratically elected, and we put in Augusto Pinochet, who was a dictator and killed like 20,000 people or some ridiculous number. We did the same thing in Guatemala in 1954, the same thing in Panama, I believe it was the 30s. I mean, you can just go down the list. If you look at the people we supported in Southeast Asia, through Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia, we only support bad guys. It's just what we've always done. It's why when the first time they brought out Zelensky and we're like, he's the good guy, I was sus. Daz, go ahead.
Another thing. If you see like from the way you see COVID and the vaccines as like a governmental scheme, you could say it's kind of like a Mao Zedong kind of thing where he killed a third of his population or whatever.
Yeah.
So I was just saying that it's kind of because we killed however many millions of U.S. Americans, citizens.
We'll see.
With just
a
shot.
Yeah, I don't think it. I think the similarity there would be. Why I don't trust benevolent politicians. So, like, I think you could make a very good argument that Mao thought he was doing the right thing when he said, "Hey, we need to get people out of the cities and back into the fields and have his Cultural Revolution," and killed 20 million people. And you could say that fill in the politician whose name I think probably most of the people who supported rolling out the Operation Warp Speed and the shot and all that were well intentioned. I think. Yeah. It's why people are not as smart as we think we are, and why that's a problem.
Yeah, to your dictatorship, like where always, I gotta say, no one's really doing anything about what's happening. I feel.
What do you mean?
I'm not seeing any real repercussions for any of Trump's actions whatsoever. It almost seems like what are they called? What are those tears called? Shark tears? Is that what it is?
Alligator tears?
Alligator tears. They're like, oh no, let's wear pink. Oh my God,
yeah.
This is happening. It's just happening.
But I mean, same thing. What about Bush? Like,
what do you think?
Bush killed a million fucking people.
What do you think the resolution should be?
To what?
To if we wanted to stop the Trump administration from going forward. Like, do you think that the citizens are going to have to start taking it in their hands? I feel like
I think it's the exact same answer to how you would have stopped the Biden administration from doing the things it's doing. I think they're the same team. I think.
That's the thing is I'm like it's at this point they are the same team. So what do we do? Is it time?
I mean, so there's like a couple of approaches. Like you can do have you heard of agorism?
No.
So agorism is the idea you basically just I'm going to act outside of the system. So as much as possible, you just basically do a parallel. So you're like, I'm not going to the grocery store anymore. I found this guy sells beef.
I have two friends that actually, I didn't
whatever.
know that was the term for it. I have two friends that actually have farms and lands and are low key trying to start different communes. So actually, I'm not going to rat them out entirely because I feel like I already...
What's interesting is that I think both the right and the left are coming to this, which is interesting because there's a lot of righties that are no, I'm getting the hell out of here, and I only want to, I want to separate from this evil system, and then there's a lot of lefties doing effectively the same thing, and I'm with it. So I think that, I think the least violent way I can think of getting rid of this system is something along those lines of just people taking power back locally and in their own lives. Agorism. Yeah. There's somebody I want to try and get on the show actually to talk about it. There's a few people who are out there, but it's usually done from an ANCAP again, it's more like a libertarian-y people tend to do it, but I think it works just as well for if you want to start a commune, that's my kind of leftism. Do it.
Yeah.
Start a commune, bro. Yeah. All right, so I got a couple things I want to touch on before we get into before we kill our show to get onto the next show. I got 3 little stories I want to touch on, one of which is a little more positive, I guess, from this view. So there are some people, conservatives, who are recognizing this bullshit for what it is, and maybe I'm just being stereotyping this guy. Well, this is from a conservative page that I follow, and this guy looks awful conservative. So I'm going to pardon my stereotype, and we're going to listen to what he has to say.
No, some of them are so great recently.
Oh, no, and of course I didn't hit the fucking button. There we go.
Is the whole Doge thing. is to basically create the technocratic state that Elon Musk's grandfather dreamt about 100 years ago, and Elon is now making basically happen, although it's not even just him. Like, he works for other people too. All these people have bosses, and they're actually bringing in all the stuff the World Economic Forum wants. But they're doing it slightly differently. They're saying, oh, these are the right side guys. These are the guys who are trying to take down the system. But they're doing all the same things that the World Economic Forum wants.
So I bring that up just because for the last like 3 or 4 years, the big boogeyman on the conspiracy right was the World Economic Forum. Are you familiar with the World Economic Forum? Oh, okay. So you don't ever touch your toe into the other side of the water, huh? So the World Economic Forum, the World Economic Forum is a group headed up by this guy Klaus Schwab, who looks like a Bond villain. Like, not to be racist, but he's like an old, like, I don't know if he's Austrian or German. He's like, we shall get to like what? He's got one of those voices, and it's a group basically made up of the top corporate people and the top government people, and it's people talking like when people talk about globalists. This is who they're talking about. These people who are like, oh, we're going to make everything 15-minute cities. It's all like big, very authoritarian, big picture thinkers. And the right, the conspiratorial right, has been like, this guy is the worst. These are the worst thing. This is what Biden's bringing us. Obama's one of them. Like, da-da-da-da-da.
You're right. I should be more aware of these people because I think I just think so in the opposite direction as just like an individual person. Like, I'm not, because even people on the left get me sometimes. I'm like, I just don't even, I should be looking into this. That's scary.
So it's a whole, I'm sure Danny heard plenty of talk about Klaus Schwab and WEF and whatever, right? So it's, you what? How can you forget the last name? Exactly. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting there. I do believe that there is we need to make this a cross-cultural movement. We're going to have to, if we're ever going to beat the system. You know, people who wear cowboy hats and have shotguns and drive pickup trucks are going to have to recognize they're on the same same team as people with nose piercings and purple hair and like whatever. All the people who don't currently own a multinational corporation, we're kind of in the same boat together. All right. One great little, so one thing I've been less happy about is a lot of people who were very good critics of the Biden administration have been less good critics of the Trump administration. Tucker Carlson comes to mind right away. Tucker Carlson is someone who years ago I thought was the worst person ever. Over the last few years, so specifically since being fired from Fox, kind of redeemed himself in my mind. He's someone who has asked some really hard questions, has had some really, really good interviews. He interviewed Putin when no one else would. I thought he's done some really good stuff. Since his buddy Trump got in, he seemed to have been like, all right, let's let off the gas a little bit. The good team's in, and I don't subscribe to that view. But he had a great interview with Rick Sanchez, who is a journalist. And I want to quickly give a quick snippet of this interview because I think it's really telling.
Yeah, I got that same feeling at CNN. As soon as I started challenging certain principles, criticizing, for example, certain things, then the elders at CNN, those people who were in that the row, they called it.
Oh, I remember.
They had this thing called the row, and it was like 5, 6, 7, 8 older guys who decided what stories went on the air, why they went on the air, when they should go on the air. And I remember I wanted to start doing certain stories about some of the mistakes and foibles that we had made in Latin America, for example, that were causing this immigration thing that was going on. And they said, no, we're not reporting that. I said, what do you mean we're not reporting that? I said, to a certain extent, we kind of started a civil war in Guatemala that ended up in the deaths of 200,000 people, and we removed a democratically elected president back in the 1950s, which has led to the problems that have gone into Honduras. And as the only Hispanic anchor in America working at your network, I'd like to tell some of these stories, not to be critical, so we can learn. We make mistakes. 100%. It's okay. They said, no, you will not do that story, period.
Why?
Out. I guess it made certain people in the neocon establishment look bad, and they were trying to move
that foreign intervention.
So, I thought I hit on that clip not only because it makes the same point that I always make about immigration, which is why are mass amounts of people needing to leave the country they live in? Is it because we maybe destroyed that country? So he makes that great point, but talks again about this neocon powerhouse that I think exists in the entire mainstream media, whether you're in the left media at MSN or MSNBC, or you're in the right media at Fox News. All those people will always say it's a good idea to bomb the next country, almost always. And him bringing up a very good point about how interventionism maybe had some negative consequences just immediately gets shut down. If you want to hear more about this, I think that's a really good interview. They basically talk for an hour and a half about how neocons run the media and how you can't, if you have a voice saying, I don't think we should bomb places as the first resort, and that maybe there's consequences from bombing places, you're not part of the conversation.
It's not very lucrative.
No, it's not very lucrative. No, not when you see how much money people who make those bombs are making. I want to see if I don't want to take too long. All right, I want to throw one. We're gonna have to cancel a couple more stories and one of my takes. There's one last thing I want to talk about because it's something DZ and I talked about a lot last season, and I just wanted to. This guy makes a really good point, and I want to share it with you guys. Go ahead, Des.
Of the world, the West has normalized destroying hospitals, slaughtering medical staff, butchering children and babies by the thousand, deliberately starving an entire people, torture, rape, and endless other atrocities and examples of depravity. For the West now.
He's going to go on. I think the reason I brought this up is because I immediately related it to the video of the Tufts woman. And that like people in a van roll up on you with no...
The amount of people that just walked by and like didn't do anything. I like genuinely watching those videos. I'm like, what would I have done if I was there? I would have definitely made I wouldn't have known how to not make a scene. Like, that's so scary because they weren't like in uniform. They looked like normal people with masks and hats.
Yeah.
Which is so much creepier.
Yeah.
Like, you're just going to let people get stolen off the street?
And I think what this guy's talking about with the normalizing of it is I hate what you're like that scene being normalized. People are like, oh, well, some excuse of why that's okay. But like...
The image of like this man with a backpack literally just like looking at his phone and like I'm like, you're kidding. You didn't look up at all. You didn't think
well, I'm saying, if like you said, if you're in that situation, you're a bystander, right? You're not gonna not do something, right? So that's conspiracy theory. May be staged, like Mangione type stuff, or people are just really ignorant and just.
She's in Louisiana now. I don't know.
I think I don't know. I think we always have to entertain the possibility that things on the news are not real. I haven't seen any evidence as to why that would be the case in this situation. So, but no, I mean, it's a good point. If anybody knows any reasons why any of this is not real, let's get hip to it.
I think it's too unreal to believe that it's actually real. Like, you're just letting people actually get stolen off the street. That's not real. No.
Well, so again, the bottom line to me on this is the normalization of it. And again, when it's why, like I told you, like every time I open my phone and I see that, and I'm just like, I'm so glad I'm not desensitized. I'm so glad every time I visit a new city and see people living out on the streets that it hurts me. Like, I don't ever want to be like, oh, some girl just got dragged into a van. That's whatever. I wonder what I'm gonna have for lunch today. Like, I never want that to be me.
Have another mimosa, please.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So.
And it's to cope.
But I do wonder if that's part of what's going on here is like a desensitization to the worst things ever, you know, and I think it happened during the War on Terror when we got the videos of, you know, Abu Ghraib happened and all that, and you get desensitized to violence, and we've talked about it a lot. It's just like denormalizing this shit. Like, it should never be normal. This should never be a normal thing. I don't care how much you think we need a strong border. It should never be normal that people get dragged off the streets, thrown in vans. Like, we have hearings and we have due process for a very good reason. And I don't want to ever normalize this. I don't want to ever, I don't want to ever get used to seeing, dads picking up pieces of their children from some conflict.
Yeah,
I want that to always make me sick. So,
Yeah.
Des, you got something? No?
I was gonna say like how the desensitization of stuff is like, because didn't on the bomb drones or whatever, didn't they have cameras on it?
Oh yeah.
To post or whatever, which is
Yeah.
absurd that even is a thing.
Yeah, if you want to,
Some dark web, that's post under the dark web or some shit. That's absurd.
yeah, no, there's a lot of stuff, and there's also videos you'll find out there if you want to really rage bait yourself of people like celebrating some of this, like some of the settlers, the Israeli
I
settlers.
used to see that on Twitter.
And
I will never call it X. It's
I would never call it X. Yeah, it's not good for your soul.
It's Twitter.
All right, so we are going to take a break for about 5 minutes and come back with the Doing Better show. I promise, no more doom and gloom for the rest of the day. It will all be positive. And with all these things, getting a clear view of things is always a positive thing. Getting beyond the propaganda and the horseshit is always a positive thing. Opening up dialogue with people who you otherwise wouldn't open up dialogue with is always a positive thing. Let's start having these conversations. Let's start finding middle ground. Let's stop strawmanning each other. Do you believe what those people think? Oh my God. As much as possible, try and join with them.
Yeah. Keep an open mind.
Yeah.
Understand that most things that you're consuming right now are probably a little biased.
Yep.
It is important to see both sides.
Yeah, and maybe designed specifically to rage bait you. Yeah,
Definitely me.
So definitely me too. So in the meantime, please reach out if you have anything you'd like us to cover on the Doing Better show. And if you have anything positive going on, just look around. Get outside of your house this week. I think the weather's going to be a little bit nicer. Go find a local coffee shop. Go eat there instead of Dunkin' Donuts. Go find somebody local to eat, get your dinner from, to get your next outfit from, etc., because the more that we work together and we build locally, the less we're dependent on the evil fuckers who seem to run everything. Thanks, guys. We'll be back in 10 minutes.